Welcome to Philosophy of Value Workshops number 14 of Series 7. The question for today is, how can a formal principle of value theory provide practical ethical guidance? Reading from one of my books is The Pursuit of Value, Chapter 2, Section 7. So 2 weeks ago I argued for a value imperative in the form of the will to value value, and the affirmation of value. And I have also argued that this principle has a proclivity for and leads to a sufficiency of value. Sufficiencies of value are value states like moral fortitude, magnanimity, and self-respect. I'm primarily interested in this principle as a trajectory for human existence as consciousness. Yet value is also a cardinal concept in religion, aesthetics, meaning, purpose, and ethics. And in this respect, I have previously proposed and explained a value theory ethics. But I haven't yet explained in detail how a value theory ethics can provide practical ethical guidance. So this is what I want to do today, but we must first need to understand what such practical guidance means. Kantian and consequentialist theories are often regarded as trying to produce a procedure to work out what to do. That is, in extremis, ethics is taken to be working out a means of determining right and wrong in every situation. Virtue theory challenges both of these assumptions of morality defined by actions and their detailed determination. Virtue theory challenges these by defining virtue as character and disposition rather than by action. Principles of right action in virtue theory are thereby regarded by John McDowel as uncodifiable, and Bernard Williams endorses this view as the virtue of virtue theory. As a form of guidance, Aristotle does, however, describe virtue as the middle way between two extremes. And he also provides us with a list of guiding virtues like courage, temperance, and magnanimity. But Aristotle doesn't think of these as invariant rules without regard to circumstance. For example, he says that to be angry in the right way, to the right degree, for the right reason, is virtuous. But there is still a problem determining right action in virtue theory. This is because virtue theory determines action on the contingencies of natural and social conventions. And on virtue theory, a virtuous person is good due to his disposition, not just because of his intentions or actions. That is, a virtuous person is good, he just doesn't will good. He knows what to do by his character. So Aristotle was asked, how can people become virtuous or act virtuously if they are not already virtuous? Aristotle's answer was to practice the virtues in order to internalize them and to become virtuous. But these answers are still not able to predetermine what virtuous action is or give clear guidance. My response is to reinterpret or reconceive virtue theory as a value theory ethics. On this view, the virtues are replaced with values. And this can be easily done because the virtues are typically value states. Value states are mental states which necessarily involve values. This strategy retains the advantages of virtue theory while resolving its problems with the concept of value. Its advantages are avoiding necessary relations, mandated motivations, and detailed determination of action. The advantages of a concept of value over virtue theory as a guiding ethical principle are as follows. As previously argued, value and value theory offers a focused, unitary and coherent principle of action. And as also argued, ethical normativity can be derived from the character and constraints of value. So I reject the idea of a principle that can determine moral action in every possible or imagined circumstance. But I accept and now explain how maxims or a principle of value can guide practical ethical outcomes. A couple of basic examples are as follows. Taking things that don't belong to you and that you don't need is greed, which reflects negative value, and harming others without cause is pathological, which also reflects negative value on yourself. Moreover, other people are instances of intrinsic value who require due consideration. Yet basic relation with other people in value theory ethics only provides a relatively straightforward example. We presuppose here that a value-seeking agent is asking how he can maintain or enhance his value. It's understood that this does not mean self-aggrandizement, egoism or selfishness. But a value-seeking agent, also cited by Nozick, looks out upon the world with the disposition of seeking value. And he finds that other people are intrinsically valuable beings whose value reflects back upon himself. This is because he judges contingently that valuing others attributes to them the value they have. Conversely, not valuing others denies them the value that they have. More forcefully, harming others for no reason is perverse or pathological, and recognizing that one is perverse or pathological undermines one's own value. But there are many other questions about valuing other people that we will need to ask, such as, to what extent should I value others? Should I value others equally as myself, or more or less than myself? These questions involve variable and graduated factors that are determined by the circumstances. Virtue or value theory ethics vigorously refrains from determining every action in every circumstance. Moreover, these material relations are contingent and are judged as such by the agent, though they are inescapable. Value theory ethics argues for inescapable, not absolute or necessary relations with others. Yet value theory ethics claims a principle that is also supposed to guide a trajectory for human life. And we can do that now by applying and trying out the principle of value in various circumstances in life. And these circumstances will presuppose objectives like happiness, honour, dignity and truth. We can also apply the same principle of value to social values like justice, equality, freedom and human rights. On this view, such ethical values are normative, but not objective, as I have argued elsewhere. That is, actions like theft, murder, lying and cheating must be assessed by circumstance and intention. The idea that, for example, theft is wrong is enforced by the fact that moral wrong is part of the meaning of the word theft, and we must thereby determine moral wrong by intent and disposition, not by the action itself. But of course, the outcomes of our actions are crucially assessed by our intentions. Yet value theory ethics, together with the principle of value, can provide practical guidance for ethical action. We can show this by considering the relation of value to various states as candidate moral criteria and objectives. That is, we are assessing mental states like happiness and authenticity instead of actions like lying and killing. This is because on value theory, morality is assessed in terms of intent and disposition. Saying that, I need to comment on intrinsic value and the view that actions aren't right or wrong in themselves. Many philosophers believe in objective moral values and similarly in the intrinsic value of objects and actions. I myself hold that only people and mental states can be candidates for having intrinsic value. My arguments for this view include Mackey's rejection of objective value, and Mackey's rejection of objective value includes the intrinsic value of actions. And these principles of objective and intrinsic value are further considerations that can guide ethical action. That is, they show that ethical injunctions cannot be simply taken off the shelf and used as moral facts. And intrinsic value also cannot be automatically be used to determine ethical action. This is because some intrinsic values are trivial and without motivational or moral import. For example, eating my lunch may be of intrinsic value, but saving my wife's life is of greater intrinsic value. To begin an assessment of mental states as criteria of ethical guidance, we can start with happiness and pleasure. Both intuition and utilitarianism regard happiness and pleasure as a criterion of ethical guidance. Yet intuition and utilitarianism give priority to happiness over pleasure, which we needn't discuss. John Stuart Mill argued that we know happiness is uniquely valuable because it's the only thing we desire for its own sake. Moreover, happiness can't be an intrinsically valuable state because it's not always valuable. And happiness fails as an ethical criterion because it lacks meaning, purpose, value, and the why of life. But it is certainly desirable to be happy, and happiness is an undeniable human good. More than that, happiness has a certain sufficiency in itself. That is, its sufficiency means that nothing more is needed to endorse the experience of happiness. So experiences can be intrinsically happy and valuable, but not intrinsically valuable. I now want to compare this property of the sufficiency of happiness with the sufficiency of value in value theory. Aristotle similarly held that the final good was sufficient in itself, and as a moral good, it must be a value state. But the value states I'm talking about are those like self-esteem, moral fortitude, and magnanimity. Yet I have used Mill and Aristotle to illustrate the kind of sufficiency that value states can have. And I have previously argued that the will to value leads to a certain sufficiency of value. And the point here is that such value sufficiency can be used to give practical ethical guidance. But before showing how this can be done, I want to further compare utilitarianism and value theory ethics. Firstly, both utilitarianism and value theory employ enhancements of their preferred states as principles of action. That is, utilitarianism employs the maximization of happiness, and value theory employs the enhancement of value. So, secondly, the main problems of utilitarianism are those of motivation, justification, and quantification. That is, why should we be motivated to promote happiness for everyone, and how to ethically justify happiness? Utilitarianism and value theory share the problem of quantifying either happiness or value. But the problem of quantification is more acute for utilitarianism, which stands on its practicality. The problem there is utilitarian happiness as a guide of practical ethical action. Justification and motivation are arguably less problematic for value theory ethics. This is because value theory can claim both values as justifying premises and a value-based theory of action. Again, these are positions that I have argued elsewhere. Yet I can now present value sufficiency as an intuitive and philosophically justifiable practical criterion of action. My first and easiest example to present is moral fortitude as opposed to moral weakness. A preference for moral fortitude over moral weakness is intuitively compelling or even overwhelming. Yet moral fortitude is also philosophically explicable as a certain independence or sufficiency of value. That is, a degree of independence from social and other pressures with a capacity to act according to conscience. Yet this capacity is also explicable as an independence from supporting cognitive frameworks. Another cogent means of determining right action is found in the different motives of self-esteem and social esteem. To conceive of oneself through the eyes of others is a powerful amplification of self-concept. And to establish self-esteem over social esteem is a mark of maturity, resilience, and self-worth. Geoffrey Brennan and Philip Pettit base their ethical theory on the power of social esteem. They write that people desire the esteem of others and shrink from their disesteem. And they find agreement with this syndrome when they say just about everyone who is a forebear of modern social and political theory. The power of social esteem is difficult to dispute, but so is the perversity of political systems that exploit it. Of equal significance is the power of social esteem as an opposing determination of moral and political action. A third determinant of right action on the basis of value distinguishes dignity cultures from honour cultures. In his book Honour Bound, a sociologist, Ryan Brown, differentiates these two conditions. Basically, dignity cultures derive value from our humanity, whereas honour cultures derive value from reputation. The idea of honour has depreciated in modern thought, especially in light of honour killings. Another example is that an award is an honour that will be undermined if everyone was awarded it. the contingent and social aspect of honour may justify a preference for dignity cultures. Yet whatever the preference, honour and dignity remain viable means of determining action. Yet these three brief examples of moral fortitude or weakness, social or self-esteem, and honour or dignity, as well as earlier reasons for valuing other people, and the more nebulous notion of sufficiency, recommend motives, not particular actions. This is because the detailed determination of particular actions is mistaken for at least two reasons. One, life circumstances are infinitely complex, which prevent the construction of fixed rules. Two, actions do not have intrinsic value, and their moral worth resides in people's intentions. There are many such possible examples, but one more is Sartre's notion of the spirit of seriousness. The spirit of seriousness is to take subjective values as objective, to escape freedom and responsibility. Sartre gives many examples, like the judge who says, "I must sentence this man to death, it's my job." This is a classic example of bad faith and inauthenticity. That is to say, I have no choice when I do have choice. Sartre gives another interpretation as appropriating things for their own sake rather than for their human value. And he asks, can one live this new aspect of being, that is, as freedom and authenticity? So in this Sartrean analysis, we are offered numerous maxims to guide practical ethical action. These are avoiding inappropriate values and bad faith, and asserting authenticity, freedom and responsibility. But Sartrean existentialism is renowned for its inability to provide an adequate system of ethics. He once claimed to do this by protecting the freedom of others, but this hardly adds up to an ethics. And to hamper himself further, he wrote, "Ontology itself cannot formulate ethical precepts." Yet existentialist injunctions can be elaborated and underpinned by theories and principles of value as suggested. It is, of course, standard practice for existentialism to find its foundations in phenomenology. And I want to look to phenomenology and its features of value to provide foundations for the injunctions given. I've already noted the feature of sufficiency, and we can note others like coherence, consistency and quality. Similarly, knowledge and truth are often cited, incorrectly in my view, as intrinsic value and as reasons for action. So they provide direction for practical action, but they can't provide legitimate initial moral motivation. And the idea of intrinsic value was seen to only provide relative, not overriding reasons for action. G.E. Moore and Robert Nozick wanted to determine both priority and intrinsic value with its degree of organic unity. They held higher degrees of organic unity to herald higher value. But as Nozick himself points out, organic unity can also be a property of negative events. For example, concentration camps, hatred, evil plans, wars, and the concept of evil. Yet this problem of negative events being regarded as positive is due to conventional moral judgments. As an internal property of thought outside moral convention, organic unity still works as a criterion. As an example, I like the idea of God as a mythical example of organic unity or coherence. In this context, Satan represents the coherent but negative value. I myself think that organic unity could be better described as coherence, which would exclude negative values. And the circle of coherence will be widened to include other criteria of value. That is, other criteria like the value of other people, sufficiency, truth and beauty. Related to the notion of coherence, we also have the notion of consistency as a criterion for assessing value. Consistency here means reduction of psychological, ontological or theoretical gaps or fissures. For example, I'm thinking about constraints on value, like Hume's principle and Sartre's bad faith. To derive an ought from an is involves an inconsistency that affects quality of value. I also find Sartre's constraint on value influence the consistency and quality of value. For example, we are condemned to choose, condemned to be free, and avoidance of choice and freedom is bad faith. And in a spirit of seriousness, we inconsistently pretend that subjective values are objective. The concept of consistency excludes self-contradictory or self-negating values that I would also want to discuss. Yet the notions of coherence and consistency also bring us back to quality as a criterion of value. To begin with, the idea of quality rectifies the misleading ideas of the quantification or maximization of value. The assessment of value due to its quality may be crucial, but what does quality of value mean? And how might we assess it? It's affected by many factors in addition to coherence and consistency. We should first give some examples of different qualities of value. Kant, for example, argued for the quality of intention in the goodwill as the primary criterion of morality. For Kant, moral action needs to be free, informed, and without constraints or inclination. With Kant, we are led back to freedom, reason, and the rejection of natural inclinations to act. Quality is also a principle that Robert Pirsig discovers in his Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Pirsig sees quality as an excellence in human artifacts, but he neglects quality as a value state. Yet we need to define quality as a property of value states like self-esteem and love. So apart from sufficiency, coherence, consistency and intrinsic value, how might we assess the quality of value? One previous suggestion was that the quality of value can be assessed by its object or what we value. Hence, mental objects like God, truth and goodwill might be thought to yield high quality values. I previously argued that this is because of the indeterminacy of truth and the moral good. And unexpectedly, the quality of the object can also vary in its degree or near absence of cognitive involvement. I previously described this as attenuated cognition in explanations of mystery, obfuscation and morals. But values and their objects are subject to variable factors like their ambient backgrounds and reasons for holding them. For example, the ambient background for valuing God may be resentment and fear, and we may value truth because we want other people to think well of us. and there is no end to the complexity of such considerations which weigh against clear reasons for action. Yet it's entirely realistic to hold that reasons for actions disappear into complexity, as Nietzsche thought. Yet that's not a reason not to act at all, or not to accept prima facie reasons for action as above. And it's my underlying view that detailed determinations of reasons for actions are unrealistic, and that reasons for action must be chosen pragmatically on the best information informed by a principle of value. Yet such judgments will be contingent and fallible because they depend on the agent's limited knowledge. And this view compares favourably to Popper's fallibilist view of true science, that it can be mistaken. That is, fallibilism in science or ethics isn't a weakness but a strength. For example, as alluded to earlier, traditional and Kantian moral values were thought to be justified by objectivity and reason. But there were at least three problems with this approach. One, there are no objective values argued by Mackey, others and myself. Two, Hume's problem of mandating the acceptance of objective values through reason. Three, the misplaced wish to universalize right or wrong moral action. For example, Kant's extreme position that we must never lie under any circumstances. Moreover, the primacy of value traditionally given to objectivity is in fact a contingent choice. We can similarly attribute primacy of value to pragmatic reasons for making a choice. Yet on a value theory ethic, the material content of action is fallibilist but inescapable for two reasons. One, the material content of action is directed by our best assessments of reason, fact and value. Two, the principle that satisfaction of human motivation will inevitably be directed towards value. This approach replaces untenable ethical necessity with a more arguable inescapability. As A.J. Ayer explained, strict necessity can only apply to logic, not physics or ethics. Yet there are no definitive criteria for determining the material content of right action, as must be the case. Actions will differ under different circumstances by different people as expressions of a good will. But it might be argued that action determined by the best thing to do is no better than social convention. Yet on a value theory ethic, motivation to do the best thing is enhanced by an appreciation of value. That is, value reasons for actions are reached deeply into both theory and structures of consciousness, and they thereby have stronger reflective reasons for the agent to enact them. In conclusion, I've shown how a value theory ethics can provide practical ethical guidance in several ways. I firstly argued that principles that try to determine right action in every situation are misguided, and that opposed to Kantian and traditional theories, virtue theory doesn't have this ambition. But virtue theory isn't able to provide adequate guidance or explanations of reasons for action. To resolve this problem, I reinterpreted virtue theory as a value theory, with value as a principle of action. This also may seem obscure as a guiding principle of action, but is intuitively and philosophically transparent. That is, we can see why self-esteem is preferable to social esteem, and dignity preferable to honour. And these choices are enhanced in light of a motivating principle of value. That is, a value-seeking agent looks out on the world and asks how he can maintain or enhance his value. Actions deemed good will reflect favourably on him and negatively for actions deemed bad. The paradigm example was the intrinsic value of other people, which we may either affirm or deny. Other actions like theft or harm will also reflect value onto the agent accordingly. Yet in looking for a substantial basis for the justification of these values, I suggested several features. These were the organic unity of Nozick and Moore, which I described as coherence. Other features were consistency, quality, and sufficiency of value. These features can be further explained by a phenomenology of the structures of consciousness, but this is outside the remit of this paper to explain how value theory can provide practical ethical guidance. So let me have your criticisms and comments at the meeting or on one of the websites like meetup.com or YouTube.